The story is about Anastasia, an orphan girl, and her sad life, and how her life changes after meeting a man. So let's begin. In the morning Redford called Anastasia to his room and she began to speak. Anastasia Everdeen. I overlook your selfish behavior up until now. I was expecting you to realize and regret how terribly you've been behaving all this time, and finally changed for the better. Anastasia began to speak to herself. What a joke, he never even sees me in his eyes. Ever since Anastasia came to this mansion, even the servant have looked down on him. Despite him being the duck fiancé, he never tried to do anything about it. Anastasia began to speak her mind again. Why would he reach to me now? The duck again started to say, but all you done is disappoint me. Even in this documentation he doesn't show how he really feels. Again disbelief. Asia began to think that it'd be much better if you got angry for once. It's as if the duck is saying that Anastasia is not what the office anger. Again the duck say to Anastasia that, do you think that I would bear with your conceited and selfish behavior for the rest of my life? Hearing that Anastasia got angry and Sayed Khan cited you say, the duck Sayed, I have already said that you never have the right to call me selfish or Redford. Then Anastasia began to say to herself that, I can cry if I do, this person will only laugh at me. Anastasia started biting her lips in anger. Said I am still your fiancé though, His Majesty directly. At that time his servant suddenly came into the office and said, Your Grace, it's an emergency, His Majesty has passed away. Hearing the news Anastasia was very shocked, but the duck was very happy. The duck said, in the end you have even lost your safety net. After winter a spring will come. For Anastasia spring is a cruel season, the spring that is coldest than winter. Anastasia life has always been a tragic one. Anastasia's father, Jacqueline Everdy, had a gentle personality but no talent. A mediocre person overall. Having been exiled after losing the power struggle, and having already passed the prime manageable age, he ended up marrying the daughter of a baron of a rural area. His wife, Verita Everdy, was very beautiful, despite being born from a poor baron's family. Both of them were able to attain the title of Viscount, but due to their small region, could not escape being poor. Sealing inside year to his brothers who were able to climb the social ladder. Jacqueline hung himself the year Anastasia turned 40. At his final not a single relative who attended shed a tear for him. When Anastasia's mother was crying, Anastasia said mother, and her mother hugged her and started crying. But everyone else who came there started talking about them. They were talking that his daughter found him. She's only 14 age and 14 years old, already mature enough. Even so to show his daughter such a cruel sight. Not long after Anastasia discovered that they had a significant amount of debt. Even selling almost everything they owned couldn't pay of the debt. And so they became nobles only in names. A year after, while sitting holding a grudge against Jacqueline, very tired also killed herself. After losing both of her parents, Anastasia became an orphan. Because of a law that no bills cannot work, she starved for days on end. She was thinking, I wonder when the last time I eat was so cold, I am hungry, I am also thirsty. So lonely, why is it always Anastasia? She said that her hand and feet were so raw she wanted to die. But after imaging her parents' face she was very scared, even so she didn't want to die like her parents. Suddenly a luxurious carriage stopped by her house. It has a swan emblem. It was the crest of Everdy family. From that carriage a person came out. That person is Countess Everdy. The Countess said that she was surprised that Anastasia noticed her arrival. She also saw yet that Anastasia looked like her mother. She pushed Anastasia and said he is a bit too thin, but not bad. After hearing that Anastasia said, what are you doing? Her aunt said how impertinent, just the obedient, she is smart, and said Anastasia was going to get marriage. Hearing that Anastasia was very shocked. Anastasia leaves for home with Aunt Tara in her horse-drawn carriage. That carriage cushion was really soft. When her father and mother was still alive he never had a chance to sit on it. Their carriage arrived at her uncle mansion. Earl Everdy looks so much like Anastasia's father. Her uncle said, Anastasia, do you know how political fraction of these empire divided? This empire had 4 fractions, the emperor fractions, the noble sections, the pops faction, the duck side. In reality 200 years ago, the Poop's lovers were on the blink of falling because of its corruption, and the other 3 fraction were fighting for the main spot. Everdy House has been in the emperor faction for many generations. Anastasia uncle said the Pops flowers are falling down, the nobles aren't showing any moves. The problem lies in the duck's side. Their blood belongs to the royal family, so we can't flag a war with them. He also say that, the other day before his death, Duck Redford had delegated authority to his son. In other words, the right to inherit the throne is now his. That's all is no way like his father, he is a greedy man. He also say that, there be a hug problem if he shock hands with other fractions and aimed for the throne. He is really hurt over his father passing. He told Anastasia that he heard that Anastasia was in debt. And he will pay it all of on one condition that Anastasia have to get married with him on behalf of his house. He was using Anastasia as his tool to stop the dark from taking the throne. With that hug debt, even if Anastasia work for the rest of his life, he won't be able to pay it off. Though even if he lived a rich life, she still won't be happy. It's been a while since Anastasia abandoned the Nobel title. There's one thing that Anastasia is sure, that the duck will get bored of him. All the things that happened those days when she have to bear teeth in hunger will no longer return. She is ready to accept this marriage. And she said yes to his uncle. 7 months later, Anastasia was in the duck house and she was looking around her garden. Then the duck said from behind, "You are my fiancé." Then Anastasia looked at the duck and said it was her fiancé. Marriage life with the duck had now begun after the coming of age ceremony was done. The owner had made himself known to the nobles. Anastasia has to come with him against her will. After entering the party, everyone started talking about Anastasia. They say that she was pretty but still an orphan. Even if she is now the duck's fiancé, it won't change the fact that she is a lonely rat of these society. The duck asked Anastasia if he was okay, but there was an angry look on his face. He starts to say again that this will never end, and Anastasia says that she no. Anastasia asked therefore that he must really hate him. Therefore said, "Of course, I cannot stop this engagement, but I'll say this, no way you dear the Red Fort name for sure."
In the previous episode, we saw Anastasia and Redford at a party where Redford tells Anastasia that, "You'll never be able to bear Redford's name." Hearing this, Anastasia let go of Redford's hand. She tells Theodore that she guesses Theodore shouldn't have said that. Lately, there's been lots of letters that had the Emperor's seal sent to the Indus written that he asked to let Anastasia live here. After reading the letter, Redfoot was very angry and said, "Does your Majesty want me to make this marriage official?" The next morning, Anastasia comes to stay at Redfort's house, and Redfort is very upset to see Anastasia. Anastasia did expect that the life Anastasia will lead in the duck's mansion won't be easy. But she didn't think that the duck would never bat an eye and treat her so coldly. One morning while Anastasia was walking in the garden, a servant came and said to Anastasia that the Red Fort doesn't want Anastasia to go anywhere of her own will. Anastasia was very surprised to hear this. She said, "Then what duck want I sit in my room all day?" Job then smiled and said, "Yes, that's what you thought." He clearly has never come to see Anastasia since she has been here. The server said, "If you still want to get outside, then please avoid where his eyes can land." Why would Anastasia have to obediently obey Red Fort orders? Since that's what she thinks, she always watch exactly where he goes and sit right there on purpose. One day, when Redford was walking through the garden, Redford was annoyed when Anastasia deliberately sat down in front of him. After seeing Anastasia, Redford tell his servant to clean the pile of trastee in the garden out of his eyes. The owner's fiancé is heated by their own master, so being insulated in the mansion is inevitable. Whenever the servants of the house saw Anastasia, they started talking bad things about her. Anastasia himself doesn't know when he's become the torn of everyone's eyes. Disbelief, Asia thought to herself, "Whatever you say, it's like air to me. What's there to be afraid of seeing those scornful eyes? Compared to seeing two people hanging in front of her eyes, there are nothing." Those memories are still tormenting Anastasia. But she won't starve staying here. She can stand straight with just that alone. Anastasia laughed and said there was no point in being here. Anastasia sees Theodore and greets him good morning, but after seeing Anastasia he closes the door. Every time Theodore look at Anastasia he never seemed to bring himself to like her. Especially on the day, it reminded him that Earl Everdeen had that same look. And 2 years had passed. One day, a lady sends a letter to Anastasia to invite her to the tea party. That lady was the daughter of a very famous marquis in politics. She can't not come but to count all those dresses she had. She get paid for shopping, but it's not much. That lady has such a great influence that she cannot dress casually too. Even a little carelessness can cause enmity to all of the nobility. She was looking for something she could wear with a little sewing. The dress design was a bit strange, but this blue dress material is good. She chose the dress to embellish. Anastasia asked a servant to clean the dress and call a patchworker. The servant said with a devilish smile, "The patchwork, huh? Roger that." After that she was scooped of enough money to get the dress decorated. On the day of the tea party, the servants were smiling. In the last 2 years these servants never forgot to sabotaging Anastasia. Even so openly vandalizing like this and cut it to the point where it can be adjusted anymore. The fabric cannot be reused either. The pulse of the skirts are dirty too. Anastasia didn't expect those guys to be this much. The servants were laughing and saying, "Oh, what happened here?" Anastasia looks at them and says, "You won't even hide it now." Anastasia adds, "You are behind all this, aren't you?" Servant laughed and said, "What are you saying? You should go now or you will be late." She has no authority in this palace whatsoever, that even the servants despise and mock her. In the end she couldn't adhere to the dress code. He came in a yellow dress and everyone started laughing at him. A woman came forward and said that Anastasia has a unique sense of style. Anastasia thanks Lady Slocking for inviting her here, and unfortunately she couldn't read their assigned dress due to some issues. The girl says in disbelief that this dress suits you well. Throughout the tea party, they cheat Anastasia as if she were the cake they were served. They pierced and sliced her with their gazes and words of contempt. When Anastasia was coming home at night, she thought she just wanted to live a little. Servants bring him cold water for bathing or rotten banana food for him to eat. This is no change from his previous life. He can take everything. It's not something special that can't take it. Suddenly I overheard some servants saying that if she wasn't the daughter of a noble family, he would have paid her for one night. Another servant said, "What are you saying? You will only waste your money. He has nothing but good looks." Saying this they started laughing. On the other hand, Anak came and was totally shocked to hear these words. He ran to his room and locked the door. He started telling himself that he can take them. They are nothing to him. He is fine. Just good food, good clothes and a place to stay and to live a little is a lot for him. She began to tell herself not to show any weakness. If she was measurable, Theodore would laugh at her and break off this engagement. There is no difference in this life compared to his previous life. The next morning a servant brought her rotten food that no human could eat. Anastasia looked at the servant. That job said, "What happened? What is the problem?" Anastasia smiled and said, "Are you asking me to eat these?" The servant said, "The food is very expensive, so don't waste it." Anastasia was completely surprised to hear this. The servant asks him to eat this really rotten food. He knows that he can never expect anything good in this house, but what he has done is that he has to put up with this. Why hate him so much? So if that's the reason you really want to hate me, that's why Anastasia threw that rotten soup on the servant. Anastasia said, "If you really want to despise me that much, I will give you a reason to despise me." Behaving well for so long and obeyed everything they said. So why are you doing this all of a sudden? Anastasia asked the servants to bring another bowl of good soup for her as long as she wants well. The maids started wondering why she is suddenly behaving like this. No one in this palace supports her in any way. It is a duck palace in Redford. The maid laughed and said, "Why should I do this for you? There is no one beside you. You threw this food on me yourself. And besides, if it goes outside, the duck will be very angry with you." Before saying this, Anastasia came in front of him and slapped him hard. This shocked the maid. Her cheeks turned red and Anastasia's hand also turned red. Anastasia keeps thinking these nonsense just to save Redford's honor. It's not that Anastasia is looking for anything expensive. She just wants to have some peace, but that's not possible here. The maid suddenly started to shout that what Anastasia did now. The maid had blood coming out of her face as she started yelling at Anastasia and told her that Anastasia must be punished for her actions and that she would go and tell the duck. Hearing this laugh, "He will not eat." Anastasia starts beating him without letting him finish his sentence. Anastasia's actions are witnessed by a servant from outside and thinks that if Anastasia is not stopped now she might kill the servant, so she rushes and informs the duck. Anastasia beats the maid so badly that her face is cut and she apologizes to Anastasia. Once facial notice that a lot has been cut from his face and he can't work anywhere else with this look. Jobs and begs Anastasia not to beat him again and to forgive him. Anastasia then says that they never responded to Anastasia actions. They only defamed Anastasia behind her back and tortured her, but Anastasia never said anything. The servant apologized to him that he would never do this mistake again. Anastasia tells him to go out and convince someone to come in so he can be alone for a bit. Fearing the maid ran away from there. Anastasia has endured so much it's really pathetic. That rotten soup gave Anastasia a headache. Anastasia made no mistake, she could take anything as long as she wasn't hungry. Anastasia goes to the front of the balcony. She feels very good today. At that time, a servant from behind said that the duck is calling him. He never called the duck and now he is calling him to kill a maid. Anastasia entered the house and looked at him very angry. He tells Anastasia that his head is broken. Anastasia says, what a silly question. Anastasia said she was in such a place. Is there any need to maintain?
In the previous episode, we saw Theodore summon Anastasia to his office. There he talks Anastasia about beating the maid, and tells her to stay in her place. He asks Anastasia to restrain herself. He says Anastasia is not human, she doesn't feel any remorse for killing that servant. Hearing this from Theodore, Anastasia starts laughing, and Anastasia says, I am not a human being, so what you misbehaved with me is human. Then, Theodore says, the maid you tried to kill has been working here for many years. He also added that Anastasia shouldn't go beyond her limits. Anastasia was surprised, and said she didn't forget her place. That maid forgot her place. She also said has the Redford family's standards reached the point where they can joke with maids like this. Theodore gets very angry hearing Anastasia's words, and says, what does a low family girl like you know about standards? You are insulting my family. Anastasia listens to Theodore, and says, in a calm voice, what is there to be so proud of your family? Anastasia goes front of the door, and says, your family is so great that they insult your wife, and you think you are the master of the family. Anastasia also says that Theodore thinks that Anastasia is standing in her way. Anastasia smiles at Redford, and says, you are just an ordinary person with nothing but your name. Redford tells Anastasia that she is a shameless girl. Redford's arrogance smacks of Anastasia's words. Then Anastasia said, she don't think Theodore understand his place. He has nothing but the name of this Redford family. Redford folds his hands, and started to say, it's a good thing Anastasia's parents hanged themselves already, or he would have killed her family with his own hands. Anastasia is shocked by such words. She never thought Redford would say such thing about her dead parents like this. Anastasia's father kills himself and leaves Anastasia and her mother. Mother also does the same. They are irresponsible parents, but Anastasia spends a lot of time with her parents. No matter how much Theodore hates Asia, Anastasia is so shocked by these words that she begins to tremble and move forward to Theodore, and slaps Theodore on the cheek, shouting that if anyone should die, it shouldn't be his father, but Theodore, adding that Theodore is a very shameless man. Theodore grabs her hands, but Anastasia pushed Theodore, and ran away to her room. Theodore wants to take out all his frustrations on Anastasia, because Anastasia is powerless. Anastasia comes to her room and starts destroying everything. After that day Anastasia's life has changed a lot, since the trouble with Anastasia and Theodore. And now the servants are fearing Anastasia. They try to restrain themselves in front of Anastasia. And they does not say anything bad about Anastasia. But what bothers Anastasia the most is that, now Theodore sees Anastasia almost. Whenever Anastasia goes to beat a servant, Theodore stops her. One day, when Anastasia was punishing one of the maids, Theodore came and asked if she had gone mad. Why was she beating the maid?
Why was he beating the maid? Anastasia showed a flower to Theodore, and said, do you know what this flower means? This flower is beautiful, but carries the history of the woman who was executed. Anastasia was punishing the servants for bringing this flower to insult Anastasia. Anastasia and Theodore spar time together, as they stand in the same place, but with their backs to each other, even if there is time, but nothing changes. Whenever Anastasia goes to beat a maid, Theodore comes in front of her and keeps saying, can't you restrain yourself for one day? But Anastasia says, since I am the owner of Redford family, I was teaching the maids a little. Anastasia and Redford can't stop looking at each other, even though they don't like each other, but that doesn't mean they like each other. A lot of time passes like this, until one day many party invitations arrive for Anastasia. Because Anastasia is the future bride, so there are many invitations from many rich families. Whenever Anastasia goes to a party, everyone starts gossiping about her, and nobody loves her. She wants to kill them. She is a lonely doll. Anastasia chooses a special invitation from many invitations, and everyone leaves her aside, when she goes to the party according to that invitation. No one wants to talk to her at all. Everyone starts saying, "What is she doing here again? She has nothing but her good looks." Duck also ignores her. Anastasia then fired a glare at the women and they left looking away, turns his face away. During the dance, everyone starts dancing but no one wants to dance with Anastasia. So Anastasia goes to the balcony. As
Anastasia goes to the balcony. As Anastasia begins to think about all the abuses that have happened to her, a man comes from behind and asks her if she is all right. Anastasia thinks someone is talking to her and immediately turns around and sees a handsome man standing there. Anastasia is very surprised because no one wants to talk to her before, so what is this man? The man nervously says that he didn't want to scare Anastasia. At least this guy didn't come to make fun of her, Anastasia thought. Anastasia says in a soft tone, "Of course, she's scared." The guy slowly walks towards her and starts saying, "Okay, then I'll try my best not to scare you anymore." Hearing this, Anastasia was completely surprised. She noticed that the man's ears were red, and he started laughing. And if anyone spoke to Anastasia at the party, everyone would make fun of her, insult her and put her in a corner. The first time someone spoke to her, she didn't want to miss the chance. She leans in front of the man and tells him what she can do not to be afraid. They both sit on the balcony laughing together. This is the first time anyone has spoken so openly with Anastasia. The man suddenly lowers his head and says Anastasia can't really lie. He says her eyes shift a lot. Anastasia doesn't realize what he's saying isn't true, as the man's facial expression doesn't change much, as she looks at the boy and sees the boy smiling. The boy says, "Your voice is very shaky." Anastasia wanted time to stop here, because this was the first time someone was talking to Anastasia openly. She didn't understand why she wanted time to stop here. Maybe someone was too much with her. Anastasia looks at the man and realizes that she wants time to stop because this man is the first person who didn't despise Anastasia. That's when the music starts coming out of it, and the guy says this is the last song. Then the party will end, and it's pretty much set up. He says to Anastasia, "Would you like to dance with me?" Anastasia happily says, "Of course. But I don't know your name." Then the man said his name is Sargi.
In the previous episode, we see Anastasia meets Sergey. Anastasia and Sergey come out from the balcony. Theodore was shocked to see Anastasia and Sergey come together. Anastasia keeps calling Sergey's name over and over. Sergey was very happy. Anastasia and Sergey start dancing together. Anastasia tells Sergey that Anastasia likes to say his name and that she might be attracted to his name. Theodore is very upset to see Anastasia and Sergey dancing together. During the dance, Anastasia was repeatedly stepping on his feet and saying sorry that she was a bad dancer. She had never danced before. Sergey says that he is not having any problem. While Anastasia could not understand Sergey's mind, now she clearly understands that Sergey likes Anastasia. This is how the bell ends. A few weeks passed like this. Whenever Anastasia went to a party with Theodore, she started looking for Sergey. She always left the theater with Sergey. And Theodore stays behind. Everyone there started to talk a lot about Theodore, and started to say that Anastasia had a relationship with another person, and she left Theodore. Anastasia starts laughing when she hears these things from the balcony. But she was not happy about Sergey's identity, because Sergey's family is under Theodore, whom everyone were making fun today. Anastasia then says that she can't get anything by herself, not even Sergey. Then Sergey says if he is not Anastasia's then he will not be anyone else. When the scene changes, we see Anastasia walking into her room with a pillow. She wanted to propose to Sergey because she wanted to be with Sergey. Just then, a girl comes and says that Anastasia's uncle has invited her. After hearing this, Anastasia becomes completely surprised. Anastasia's uncle invites Anastasia to his house because he knows about Anastasia and Sergey. Uncle never wanted to know about Anastasia's good and bad, but now when Anastasia wants to be happy with someone else, he tries to stop him. The next morning he arrives at his uncle's house where a maid takes him to his uncle's room without greeting her. Anastasia has seen her uncle in many parties, but her uncle did not talks to her. Uncle asks Anastasia if she is angry with him about anything. Otherwise, why is she doing such a shameful thing? He did not ask Anastasia to have a good relationship with Theodore. He knows that Anastasia is having a hard time being with Theodore. Does Anastasia wants Theodore to break off their engagement? Because of Anastasia's actions. Anastasia said that's not what she wanted. Then her uncle said that he knows that Anastasia is seeing another boy. What will Anastasia do if Theodore breaks off their engagement? How could he be so stupid? Anastasia's uncle never thought of Anastasia as a human being, he always treated Anastasia like a doll. Sergei is the only man who treats Anastasia like a human being. Anastasia can't leave Sergei for anything. Anastasia and her uncle have many quarrels about Sergei. But Anastasia tells her uncle that she will never leave Sergei. Hearing Anastasia's words, her uncle throws a jar at her. Because of throwing the jar, Anastasia's forehead was injured. But she still says she will never leave Sergei for anyone. Anastasia immediately moved from there to Sergei and tells him that she will never leave him. And Sergei agrees with her. Theodore was watching them both from above. He couldn't stand Anastasia's smile at all. Seeing Anastasia's smile reminded him of Count of Aden. He wants the Everton family to never live happily ever. Anastasia never laughed this way, and now she starts laughing for Sergei. Sergei is the son of a baron family. The baron family who works under Redford. He begins to wonder he would never have hurt Anastasia like this. Unless she was a member of the Everdeen family. He might have tried to keep Anastasia very happy, but he was an Everdeen. Count Everdeen is the king's loyal dog, who does all the bad things for the king. Because in the past he killed Theodore's mentor with poison, and after some time pretending that nothing happened, he kills his father too. So Theodore wants the Everdeen family to never be happy. But whenever Theodore thinks about Anastasia, his chest hurts a lot. He doesn't want to accept these feelings and puts all the blame on Anna's. Seeing that Anastasia is happy, he starts thinking about taking Sergei away from Anastasia. In the next scene we see Anastasia and Theodore at a year-end party. As soon as she got there, Anastasia started looking for Sergei. Theodore felt very angry as Anastasia approaches Sergei. Theodore grabs Asia's hand and drags her to the balcony. There he starts to say bad things to Anastasia. He tells Anastasia not to act like as she please. But Anastasia doesn't react to Theodore's words because she knows he always wants to hurt Anastasia. Anastasia calls Theodore disgraceful, and she loves to see Theodore's closing face. Anastasia tells Theodore that the more Theodore tries to keep her and Sergei apart, the deeper their love grows. And Anas will take the name of Theodore in the ground with his loved ones. He pushes Theodore and went outside to Sergei, and Theodore freezes there. In the next scene, we see some of the maids saying that Anastasia only invites Sergei to her tea party. Anastasia was having a great time with Sergei. When Anastasia tells Sergei that Theodore called her a dirty woman, Sergei says Anastasia has to put up with all this for him. Anastasia wants Sergei to tell her that Theodore was wrong. But Anastasia knows Sergei would never say that because they work under him. Anastasia forbids Sergei to apologize, because she doesn't want Sergei to apologize to her, and says it would be better if she was Sergei's fiancé, instead of Theodore's fiancé. Sergei agrees with him. Sergei says he swears on his sword that he will never leave Anastasia. Then all the other knights started walking towards Theodore's office together, and they asked Sergei to go with them. Sergei goes away with a farewell from Anastasia. The Romans declared war. Roman was one of the countries the empire had plagued for its riches. Roman never stopped rebelling despite falling every time. The emperor assigned this land of rebels to the duck. The name Theodore meant river of blood. And the duck intended to live up to the name and fight till death for that land. Yet,
There were only a few enemies, so it was easy to suppress their rebellion. And this time won't be any different. So should Theodore send only one knight to win the war? He wants to send Sergei so that Sergei and Anastasia will be separated for a few months. And he doesn't have to hear Anastasia's laughter. So he ordered Sergei to go to war. Anastasia keeps telling Sergei to not go to war. But Sergei doesn't listen to Anastasia. He tells Anastasia he will be back soon. A few days later Sergei went to war. Thus a long time passes and winter ends. But Sergei does not answer any of Anastasia's letters. Anastasia loses interest in food. Whenever she thinks about Sergei, Anastasia can't even sleep at night. Thinking about Sergei and can't eat any food. Some of the maids were saying that Anastasia might have lost her mind. At first Theodore looked a little happy, but now his face is not that happy. Because the war is getting a little longer compared to the demands. Although spring has passed. No letter has been received from Sergei. Yet the next day, Theodore comes to Anastasia. Anastasia expected Sergei at first. But the smile on her face fades when he sees Theodore. Then Theodore informs Anastasia that Sergei died in the war. Anastasia goes silent after hearing about Sergei's death.
Last time we saw, Sergei went to war and, after a few days, Theodore came to tell Anastasia that Sergei had died in the war. Hearing this, Anastasia turned to stone. Theodore continues to tell Anastasia that he doesn't understand anything. According to him, they should have won the war, but how Sergei died in the war is strange even to him. Words were reaching nothing to Anastasia. Anastasia shouts and tells Theodore that Theodore is lying all this. Sergei, can't you leave him? Upon hearing of Sergei's death, Theodore tries to calm Anastasia down as she begins to freak out, telling Anastasia to breathe better because Anastasia is not breathing properly. Anastasia's mind now has only one thing, that no one will talk to her anymore. There is nothing but sadness in his life. Saying this, Anastasia fainted. Anastasia was thinking in her mind that there was a tribe related to Rome called Elaine. The two tribes had been on very bad terms until now. However, the two tribes reconciled, and that was the reason behind the empire's defeat. The empire only caught on to eat when Sergei's body returned to the empire headless. It was a miracle they were able to identify him just by his scars and armor. His head was never found. It was clear that Elaine did it because of the ritual of the decapitating the ones they defeated at war. Sergei's head must have been taken as a token to their victory, kicked around by the villagers, and thrown away without being buried. In the end, however, the empire still won the war. But she lost her Sergei, since she wasn't supposed to have any kind of relationship with Sergei. She couldn't attend the funeral. Anastasia had nothing to do but cry. Anastasia started crying in front of Sergei's dead body. Anastasia spent many months crying over the size. Sergei's family doesn't want Anastasia to see Sergei's dead body, but they don't say a word, even though she begs them many times. Anastasia was screaming and crying, as if she had lost her mind. Anastasia has nothing to remember Sergei. Theodore breathes a sigh of relief as Anastasia goes mad, as it spreads through the servants. But somewhere, in the back of his mind, he was feeling a little bad for Anastasia. Now almost every day he saw Anastasia in his dreams. In his dreams she comforts her. Once again winter comes, and a parcel comes to Anastasia. It was from Sergei's family. Anastasia opens the parcel, and sees that there is a shirt. It is Sergei's shirt. Anastasia was overjoyed to receive the shirt. He felt that Sergei had come back to her. There he also found a letter. After reading the letter, she realizes that this is all Theodore's doing, but she doesn't understand what she did to make Theodore do this to her. She wanted Theodore to kill her right away, but Theodore wouldn't do that. He would hurt Anastasia. Anastasia has never been able to live like a human in her life. She has always seen all her wishes come to nothing. But Sergei was the only person who gave her some love, but Theodore took him away from Anastasia too. Anastasia heads to Theodore's office with Sergei's shirt, but is stopped by Theodore's manager, who refuses to let her in at all. Anastasia pushes him back and asks Theodore why he hates her so much. Theodore's words dry up a little. When Theodore agrees to this, Anastasia asks him why, then Theodore says that she is taking the name Everdeen. Anastasia then asks Theodore that, would Theodore have treated her a little better if she hadn't been Everdeen? When Theodore doesn't answer, Anastasia says that Theodore doesn't just hate her for the name. Theodore hates the fact that Anastasia was made by King and Count Everdeen. Theodore hates Anastasia so much because she is helpless. Theodore could not tell her anything after seeing Anastasia's sad face. But Anastasia blames Theodore for Sergei's death. Just when Theodore saw that Anastasia was holding Sergei's shirt, he realized that he couldn't change what he had done. Anastasia then thanks Theodore for killing Anastasia along with Sergei. For Theodore, Anastasia realizes what it means to live and die. But why should she accept this feeling alone? Someone has to accept this feeling too. Anastasia tells Theodore that, when Theodore loves someone, Anastasia will kill them too. She wants to make Theodore feel the same pain as Anastasia, so she tells Theodore to find someone to love soon. Anastasia's words are like roots in Theodore's throat. Anastasia also tells Theodore that, the more people talk bad about their love, or try to separate them, the deeper their love grows. Same with Anastasia. As Theodore steals the love from Anastasia, Anastasia will also steal the love from Theodore. But if she takes away his love, then people will say Anastasia never loved Theodore, so why is she doing this? By doing this, Anastasia will not get any sympathy from others, so she tells Theodore that she will love Theodore from now on. Anastasia has always followed Theodore since that day, giving Theodore a sweet smile whenever she sees him. Although Theodore didn't like this, it seemed to everyone outside that Anastasia really loved Theodore. Just then, some of the maids were saying that Anastasia first loved Sergei, but now she loves Theodore. They keep talking bad things about Anastasia, but Theodore pretends not to hear them. He couldn't concentrate on his work, only Anastasia's face floated in front of him. Theodore's manager then comes to him and asks if Theodore will work all night, to which Theodore agrees, then asks him to take some rest. When Theodore gets up to take a rest, he finds Anastasia waiting for him. As she leaves for her room with Theodore, Theodore thinks this is all drama. Theodore, however, knows that Anastasia's smile is fake, but even then he was falling under the illusion of that smile, and he kept thinking that Anastasia might love him. Theodore then took his hand away from Anastasia and told her to stop her drama. But Anastasia tries to convince Theodore that she loves him, but Theodore pushes Anastasia away into her room. As time passes, one day Anastasia receives an invitation to a royal ceremony. Last time Anastasia danced with Sergei, but this time she wants Theodore to accept that feeling. Anastasia wants to see Theodore in pain as she felt. Just then a maid comes to her room and Anastasia asks her if Theodore has agreed to have dinner with her. When the maid didn't say anything, Anastasia started beating her. Then the maid ran to the manager and said that the manager said that he will talk to Theodore. On the other hand, while Theodore is sitting in his office thinking about sleeping, his manager comes in and tells him that Anastasia has been doing a little too much lately. He asks Theodore when Theodore will break off his engagement to Anastasia. To Theodore's surprise, his servant says that he knows Theodore cannot break his engagement without the king's permission. But what Anastasia has started is turning everyone away from Theodore. Manager advises Theodore that they should break up their marriage by revealing to everyone that Anastasia is having an affair. and that she is torturing the maids. Theo then convinces his manager that now is not the right time to break off their engagement. When the time is right, he will break their engagement. Explained to his manager and asked him to prepare dinner. His manager was a little surprised. When Anastasia hears that Theodore has invited her to dinner, she stops killing the maids and starts punishing them, telling the maids that they are no less than animals, so they have their own place. When Anna asks a maid to brush her hair, the maid starts pretending to be claimed. Then Anastasia notices that the maid has eyes like her mother's, so she asks her name. The maid replied that his name was Eli Smith. When Anastasia asks about her family, the maid says that she is the daughter of a baron, but that she is working as a maid because she has many brothers and sisters. Anastasia calms down a bit by talking to the maid, and she tells her to come again tomorrow. On the other hand, at the dinner table, Anastasia was repeatedly trying to talk to Theodore, while Theodore was repeatedly ignoring her. Anastasia suddenly stops talking, and starts crying. Much to Theodore's surprise, Anastasia asks if Theodore is in a relationship with someone else. Why is he ignoring her like this? Theodore no, Anastasia will never love Theodore. When Theodore tells Anastasia to shut up, Anastasia tells him that he sometimes forgets that Theodore's first dances with Anastasia. Then Anastasia got up, and went to Theodore, and said that she loves Theodore very much. But Theodore pushes her. As Anastasia leaves, Theodore's manager comes in, and tells him that he hasn't been able to collect any evidence yet. But he has full faith that the king killed the father of Theodore. Also tells the manager that Count Everdeen may be connected to the drug business. The manager also said that Count Everdeen had gained more courage after Duke's death earlier. Therefore he wants all those who bear the Everdeen family name to die. Then Theodore seemed to see himself in the manager. Theodore asks the manager what drugs Count Everdeen is involved with. Then the manager said it was asharium. Asharium is a harmful drug. Daring to use it can lead to death. Theodore then tells his manager to keep a close eye on Count Everdeen, and to mix the drug with other drugs. According to his words, the manager also started working. In the next scene we see Theodore and Anastasia arrive at a party, where Theodore thought Anastasia should also be disappear like the others. He was supposed to be happy about this, but he couldn't be happy. When they started dancing together, Anastasia kept telling Theodore that she loved him. Then came Count Everdeen. Anastasia leaves as soon as she sees him. Count Everdeen arrives and talks to Theodore about Anastasia's good and bad. He tells Theodore that Anastasia is like his own daughter to him, so Theodore treats Anastasia well. He also says that since he brought Anastasia after she was an adult, he couldn't teach her properly, which is why Anastasia is getting involved in other relationships. When Theodore began to forget Sergei, Count Everdeen came and reminded him again. When Theodore asks Count Everdeen what he wants, Count Everdeen tells Theodore that he wants to teach Anastasia well. So if he invites Anastasia to his house, will Theodore have any problem? As Theodore leaves without answering, Count Everdeen pulls him from behind and demands his answer. Theodore gets very angry, and tells him he can do whatever he wants. After moving away from Count Everdeen, Theodore searches for Anastasia. When he goes to the balcony, he finds Anastasia leaning over the balcony. Seeing these, Theodore was very scared, and pulls Anastasia from behind, and joins him. Theodore yells at Anastasia asking if she was going to jump off the balcony. But Anastasia replied that she had lost her earring. After hearing this, Theodore came away with Anastasia. The next day, Anastasia was sitting in her room, thinking that Theodore might have thought Anastasia was going to jump off the balcony. But Anastasia had never seen such emotion on Theodore's face. Just then, a servant from behind asks Anastasia if she will go to Count Everdeen's house tomorrow. Anastasia replies that she doesn't know why. Her uncle called her, but she has to go. The next day, when Anastasia goes to Count Everdene's house, she finds Count Everdene and his wife sitting together smoking. When Anastasia asks them why they brought her here, her uncle says that did she spend the night with Theodore. Anastasia does not understand their words. Her aunt asks her if she has had an affair with Theodore. But when Anastasia disagrees, her aunt says that she is of no use, she can only disappoint them. Then Anastasia's uncle said that if Anastasia could carry Theodore's child, she would be of some use to them. When they start laughing after saying this, Anastasia tells them that they think Anastasia is a prostitute. They were shocked to hear this from Anastasia's mouth. After hearing this, Anastasia's uncle told her that there is no difference between her and a prostitute. They brought him to the Red Fort so they could get Theodore into their hands. So for them Anastasia is an expensive prostitute. When Anastasia contradicts this, her aunt tells her that sooner or later she will spend the night with Theodore. Anastasia wants to contradict this but can't. Her uncle tells her that she should do for Theodore what Anastasia did for Sergei. Hearing this, Anastasia starts to cry. Anastasia can hear bad things about herself, but she cannot hear bad things about Sergei, because he was her first love. When Anastasia tells her uncle to stay within her limits, her uncle throws the drug device at her. Suddenly, her uncle asks two maids to undress Anastasia. He tells Anastasia why she keeps forgetting that she is not human, that Anastasia has come this far because they sheltered her. After this incident, when Anastasia started walking towards her home, she repeatedly thought that she would give them a very painful death. When Anastasia started to go to her room, her maid called her from behind, which made Anastasia very scared. As Anastasia starts to walk away without answering her words, the maid follows her and asks if she should take a shower now. Anastasia disapproves and leaves. While Anastasia was in her room changing her clothes, her maid came to tell her that Theodore had sent for Anastasia. But before saying this, he was shocked, because Anastasia's body was full of blood. He was about to say something when Anastasia asked him to leave the room. Anastasia repeatedly asks her maid to go out, but she does not go. She keeps saying that Anastasia is his master and how can he leave her. Hearing the maid's words, Anastasia suddenly remembered her mother. The maid then asks Anastasia that, when she left in the morning, there was no scar on her body, so how come she is scarred now? Is it Count Everdene's doing? When Anastasia agrees, she says that, this happens to her every time she goes to Count Everdene's house. Anastasia is shocked to hear this, and asks him, what does it matter if this happens to Anastasia every day? Anastasia also tells her that, she is showing sympathy to Anastasia, but Anastasia doesn't need anyone's sympathy. Then his maid cries and says that, he does not show sympathy to Anastasia, because he does not deserve to show sympathy to Anastasia, he only wants to share Anastasia's pain. While the maid is dressing Anastasia, she repeatedly asks if Anastasia is really okay, but while Anastasia likes her words, she realizes that this is not love. Anastasia asked her shuts her up, and when she starts to leave, the maid comes from behind, saying that if Anastasia has done nothing wrong, then she has every right to be happy, and she wants Anastasia to live happily ever after. Anastasia wants to accept her concern, but can't, because maybe one day it will also go away. Just then Anastasia came into the dining room and saw Theodore. Anastasia is about to say something. Then Theodore informs Anastasia that Anastasia's uncle has sent a letter to Theodore. He also says that Count Everdene is a shameless man, because he sent a prostitute to his house. Hearing this, Anastasia was shocked. Then Anastasia asks Theodore what he is saying, and then Theodore shows Anastasia the Count's letter. Anastasia found there was a lot of nonsense written about her. In the next scene, we see Anastasia's maid telling her that someone has come to see her. The woman introduces herself as Genitia from Count Everdene. Anastasia kicks her out after seeing his clothes, but she doesn't leave. She tells Anastasia that Anastasia should be grateful that she came to teach her, because she doesn't teach anyone easily. This girl is a prostitute. Is about to slap her. The girl grabs Anastasia's hand and says Anastasia is too stubborn. She pushes Anastasia away. She tells Anastasia that there is no difference between her and Anastasia, so that Anastasia should not be so stubborn and obey her. Hearing this, Anastasia asked her maid to stand behind the door, so that no one could come in. As soon as the door was closed, Anastasia took a candle stand in her hand, and started beating her. Genetic realizes a little too late, that Anastasia is crazy. Anastasia is more dangerous than any rich and powerful man. Anastasia tells her that Anastasia and she is not the same. Anastasia doesn't need to learn anything from her, so she lets her go without killing her, and makes her a request. Anastasia goes to Theodore to make a request, but when Theodore starts insulting her, and said her to stop the drama, Anastasia smiles, and tells Theodore that Theodore thinks everything Anastasia does is drama. Theodore can't be angry with Anastasia now, even if he wants to. He doesn't know why. He's been feeling this way ever since he saw Anastasia trying to fall off the balcony. When Theodore asks Anastasia why she is here, Anastasia replies that she wants Theodore to allow Janet to stay here. Anastasia comes to him when he asks the reason. Anastasia replies that no one in this house talks well with Anastasia, so she wants the girl to stay here as her maid.